And I remember when I first realized that my father was famous, it was in the school library of my junior school. And I went into the library and somebody else pointed it out to me, said, "Look, that's your father." And I realized that he didn't own a shoe store, he was Simon and Schuster.
Well, let's talk about growing up in that household. Fair to say the family was wealthy, they were certainly well off. An apartment in New York, a place in Stamford, Connecticut, you were privileged.
Definitely.
You write in the book that it was not your ordinary family. You have these older sisters, you have a brother, you have a famous father, you have a very accomplished mother. What was life like?
On the surface of things, everything was happy and gay and music and singing and playing. And there were lots of famous people whose fame I didn't understand, unless you expected me to understand who Louis Untermeyer, the anthologist of poetry, was, or Albert Einstein. I'm so sorry, I didn't know who he was. So there were all of these amazing people, a lot of musicians. Benny Goodman was a regular at our house. He played bridge with my father. A lot of writers, but a lot of composers, like the Gershwins were, before I was born, were friends of my family. My mother would say, "Oh, he wrote," and then she would sing a song that I would somehow recognize, and then I would run off to my room to see how my dolls had finished their marriage quarrel.
Well, while all this was going on, what was going on in the household?
When I was about 8, my mother hired a young student from Columbia Teachers College to come and be an example for my younger brother, who was only surrounded by older girls, including his mother and his 3 older sisters. My father was at work all the time, and he was always at work in the city, and we lived in the suburbs or Stamford, Connecticut, or on Martha's Vineyard. So the man that she hired was significant in my life, and probably my life would have been very different had he not come into the house. But my mother and he fell in love, and when I was probably between 8 and 10, and they were in love for 20 years, during which time my father died. I always was asking my sisters, "Are Mommy and Daddy in love?" And they who knew the truth, or certain parts of the truth, were always trying to protect me and said, "Oh, yes, yes." I remember once asking my mother and father to kiss, because I'd never seen them kiss. And they staged this, you know, maybe Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant kind of thing over my father's arm, and she lay back and he kissed her. Nothing of that ever really happened. I doubt even her lover kissed her that way. It was so so silly. Something rang a bell with me I was always trying to figure out the difference between what was true and what was not true, because the grown-ups are supposed to know.
The grown-ups are supposed to know, but among the things the grown-ups didn't know, that you had your own problems with an older boy coming up, and you talked about that very candidly in your book, The Boys in the Trees.
He was one of the boys in the trees. Which branch was he on? Anyway, there were many swinging branches at different times in my life, and this one was a particularly difficult one to assimilate. He was much older than I.
You were about what?
7, 8.
And he was what?
16.
So it's a 16-year-old boy with a 7-year-old girl.
Well, yes, whatever it wasn't right, you know, but I didn't get enough of that feeling that it wasn't right, because I didn't know what was right and what was wrong, especially in the world of sex. And I also, because I was very attracted to this boy, I thought, you know, there was a lot of energy around that young attraction. And so I thought it was a great thing. And I didn't know why I had to hide it, but I told my sisters about it, and they asked some specific questions, and after having decided that I wasn't a danger to anybody, I don't think they told my mother about it for a couple of years. And it was all after the grown-ups were asleep, and it was usually in the swimming pool at past midnight. And it was to me the glamour that was my life at that point. There was one reviewer who said, "How could I have considered that, you know, cool in any way?" Well, that was one of the problems, is why did I consider it so attractive? I mean, it's a complex item, and there's no girl that has been sexually abused that it doesn't flavor or ruin or change or tilt or swerve into some other very important aspects of their romantic or sexual or physical life.
And with you, how did that play out?
Well, this particular person was in love with my older sister. And so again, he would be having his way with me, and yet we'd be walking back up to the house and he would just be following with a stare. He'd be following my sister walking. And so it was very painful because I wasn't the beloved.
Yeah.
There was also a time that my mother did find out and did have him erased from our house for a few years. Now during those years, or year and a half, I was so lonely and so sad. And so it was as if my lover had gone. And I was all of 9.
That gives us a segue into the James Taylor years.
Oh, I thought that would never happen in a place like this.
Well, I'm smiling, but I know it's a painful time for you, and painful memory, but let's talk about it some. You were married to James Taylor at a time when he was also very successful.
Very.
From the outside looking in, you would say that's a marriage that doesn't have much chance from the beginning. 2 performers, 2 stars, if you will. But let's go through it as best you can.
Well, I saw pictures of him in Rolling Stone holding Joni Mitchell's hand, and I remember thinking, I'm so jealous. Thinking, why am I jealous? Why doesn't make any sense at all. I don't know him. It's very confusing. But I remember seeing a picture of him coming home from the movies with Joey, with my sister. And he was on the cover of Time magazine. And I said to her, and she will vouch for this, I'm going to marry him. And I said it without thinking about it, for it just came out. And this was a good 9 months before we actually had a date.
You see him on the cover of Time magazine and you sort of blurt out, I'm going to marry him. And you actually did.
I actually did, much to the chagrin of his 2nd and 3rd wife. Sorry.
So you married James Taylor, and at least in the beginning, was it a marriage made in heaven or something close to that?
I was so happy. I remember thinking, I'm really safe now. I'm really safe. And it's because James was my safe person. He actually became my safe person. We never spent a night apart. I mean, it took a while to get to that safe groove, because at first it was almost too much to imagine that I was married to this fantastic person who I would only get to know better and better and better over the years, and I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to get to know him better and better. And little by little, the unknowables started to creep in and started to forecast something greater than I would know what to do with. He put it so well in one of his songs called, well, he says, angry man, hungry woman. And I was hungry for more intimacy, and he withdrew from my emotional power, which is strong. I have a strong power to connect with people. Can you feel that?
I do.
I mean, it's...
I think it's impossible to be in your presence and not feel that. You have a strong power to connect with people, unquestionably. But you're painting a picture that you were married to him and you were hungrier by the week or month or day to get to know him better, to have even more intimacy. But he was the angry man, as he sang, and he began withdrawing.
Well, there were times, and of course drugs had a lot to do with it. I'm not spilling the beans by saying that he was addicted to various drugs, I think heroin and cocaine and pot and alcohol. It was like a poly addiction, which, you know, there's a wonderful thing about Janis Joplin that said whenever she would get tired of heroin, she would switch over to bourbon, and whenever she was tired of bourbon, she'd go back to heroin. So it was, you know, drugs wear off, or their power wears off, and so you go to something else. I understand this disease. I understand it firsthand. I understand it second and third hand, and I've written about it. And I saw that when James was drunk, he was very, very loving. His guard would drop. And the other side of the coin was that he was very stiff and stern and cold and closed. And so how hard is it to stop wanting somebody to be close and warm and cozy, and yet that came with the price of alcohol. So here I was kind of saying, no, 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 don't take that drink, take that drink. No, 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 take that drink, don't take that drink. I couldn't have been a good person to get sober with because I needed his love so much in a way that I thought I needed it, in a way that was, you know, I was very selfish. Now you can call it selfish or you can call it required reading. I mean, whatever it was that I needed from a man, I needed from James.
I'm pausing a long while here. Do you still love him?
Absolutely.